Alright guys, welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to build this CRUD feature. So we are going to be able to create expenses. We are going to be able to view them in a table. We are going to be able to edit them so we can find prefilled values and update them. And then we are going to be able to delete them so we can remove them from our list. So it's going to be interesting. Let's go ahead and get started. So first thing we are going to need to do is create this breadcrumb here. So this breadcrumb, I'm just going to use like a wrapper to start with. So I'm going to start with this nav on the Bootstrap website. So when I come back to the app, we have already created the expenses app. So I'm going to go to the expenses. Actually, I'm going to go to the templates. By the way, guys, if you're new, please check out the previous videos because this is building on top of those. So I'm going to go to the add expenses. The add expenses view. So right here, I'm going to put the breadcrumb. So this, of course, will be linking to the expenses page. And then this is going to be add expenses. Add expenses. Once we have this, then this is going to link to expenses. So let's have all our links set up. So this is going to link to the list of expenses, which will be on a view named expenses. And then of course, this will be the current one. So we don't need to link to anything. So now I'm going to copy this and also have it in the index HTML. So right here, I'm going to replace everything here. Okay, so I'm going to name this as expenses. I'm going to keep the second one and call it my expenses. Okay, but we don't need to link anywhere. So I'll just keep it empty for now. Okay, cool. So once we have this, we need to set up our view and then hook up the routing. So going back to the views.py, so in the expenses app, views.py, you notice that this goes to the index and then the add goes to the add. So this is good. So let's go to our sidebar so we can add those links to the sidebar. Okay, so right here in the sidebar, partials, sidebar HTML, so where we have expenses, we are going to change the href to point to our views. So URL, then we are going to expenses. Okay, so let me just cross check on the names I've given here. So if we look at our add expense, this is going to expenses. And then if we look at our urls.py, yeah, so it's called expenses. Good. Okay, so going back to the app, we log in here. So you can see that when we log in, we get these expenses and then my expenses. So I need to add a button like add expense. So, and I want to add it here such that they are all on the same line with this breadcrumb. So for me to do that, I'm going to go to the template, this one, and then I'm going to use the grid system to actually split it out into 10 columns. So this one will be called MD, actually let me make it 9. Then I will put the navigation there, the breadcrumb. Then this one will be 2. So this is called MD2. And this is going to be a link to the add expense page. So href will be add expense. So this is going to be URL add-expense. So guys, this is the view name, which has to be unique. So if you go to the URLs, you'll see that the view name is add expenses. Okay, so just remember to correct that. And then I'm going to give it some classes. So it looks like a button. So class is called btn primary, not primary. Okay. So then it's going to say add expense. Okay, so once we have that, we need to wrap everything in a row. Remember to do that. So I'm also going to move this one down just so the messages come below. So you can even move it here. So all this is going to be wrapped in a row. So row, and everything will be in there. So we have one taking off 9 columns and one taking off 2. That makes it 11. So let's make this one take 3 so that it makes it 12. Okay, so coming back to the app, if we reload, you can see that we have add new here, and it's quite leaving space on the top. So let me come to the container. I'll give it an empty 4. Let's look at it again. Then you can see that it's here. But I want to extend this one a bit, so I'm going to make this one 10. Then this one 2. Okay, so now when we click here, you can see that we go to add expense. Good. So now let's go set up the form to create an expense. So in the add expense HTML, we are going to use like the same kind of view. So I'm going to copy this. Actually, we can just type it out. So in the add expense HTML, we already have the breadcrumb. So I'm going to put a container on it. Container. Then I'm going to give it an empty 4 2. So this is Magento. These are basically Bootstrap helper classes that can help you to fix those common issues. So let's have this one in there. And then now let's set up the form. So the form, actually not form. So form is going to make a post request. So it's going to make a post request to the same view. So it's going to be going to URL expenses. Okay, so once that's there, then we need to, in the form, first thing we are going to need to, actually let's start out from the model. So we can define the model, then the form will reflect the model. So in the views, so in the models, expenses models.py, let's first describe our data and how it will look in the database. So right here, let's set up a class. We're going to call it expense. Of course, we import from models.model just so we can get access to all our database functions and like definitions. So right here, I'm going to inherit from models.model. Then, of course, we are going to have some properties. One of them is going to be the amount, of course, how much we spent. So amount is going to be models. Then the type, I'm going to use a float field. Okay, so that will do. Then we need to define the date we spent this money. So date will basically equal to, the date will be models.date field. And then I'm going to set a default. So default because, so I'm going to use this function called now. So default is going to equal to now. So I'm going to import now from our utils. So from Django dot utils dot timezone import now. Okay, so basically what this does is, by default, if we don't supply a date, it's going to use the current date. And of course, if this was a date time field, it's going to be using the current date and time here. So good. So moving on, the next thing we're going to have is the description. So user can provide an optional description. So this is going to be models.text field. Okay, so the next thing will be, of course, we need to keep track of the user who is recording this expense. So this is going to be models. So here I'm going to use a foreign key field. So foreign key field, models.foreign key. So 2 will be the user. 2 equals user. We need to import the user, by the way. And then we need to define on delete. So when we delete the user, we want to delete all expenses. So models.cascade. So this deletes the user's expenses once the user is no longer in our database. So importing the user, so from Django contrib.auth.models import user. Okay, so another thing you're going to have is category. So we are going to have different categories of expenses. So if we are spending on like travel, we want to keep track of it, like food, like housing, insurance, we want to keep track of all this stuff. So this is going to be models. But I'm going to use like a child field. But then I'm going to show you how to like have a custom model for category. So we can like present a user with predefined categories. So here I'm going to define a max length 255, 256, who cares? Okay, so now those are the attributes. If we get another one, of course we can always update it. So then let's define it to string such that it's described. It can easily describe an instance. So I'm going to use the amount. So amount is a float field, but we want something that's a string unless we want to transform it explicitly. So I'm going to use the category here. So before we leave this place, I want to show you how you can add like more customizations to your model. One of them will be if you want to change the sort order, you can add a meta. So you define class meta, and then right here you can define something called ordering. So here in ordering, you define a property you want to order by. So we want to order by date, but of course we want to order by date then in a descending order. So you put a minus, then the attribute. Okay, so that means that when we query for the expenses, we are going to get the latest expenses on top by date, sorted by date. Good. Okay, so let's define our category. Okay, so now when it comes to categories, we're going to do class category. Of course, it should start with capital. Category, we inherit from models, dot model, and then we are going to have only one properties, which will be name, or you can think of it as attribute. So name equals models dot char field. Okay, good. So we need to provide a max length. So it will be 255. Okay, so once we have this, so let's see. Max length, not max length. Okay, make sure it's correct. Okay, so this brings me to a point where I'm going to show you something about the models, the admin interface. So when you go to, see we have a file called admin.py. So Django allows you to register these models in the admin.py file, and that way it can give you like administrative access to this model. So you can go in there, change data, add data, and all this other cool stuff. So right here, we want to also add expenses to the backend such that we can easily go there and add categories so that our users can get those pre-filled categories. So right here in admin.py, we define, so we are going to import, of course, the models. So from .models, import, one is going to be expense, another one is going to be category. Okay, so and I realized category was named inside. So I'm going to bring it outside so that we can easily import it. So once you have that, then you need to register it, which you can do by doing admin.site.register. Then the models. So one is going to be expense. Then I'm going to copy paste this. Now we register the category. Okay, good. So once we have this, I'm going to show you how to create a super user, and then we log in and create some categories. So right here, I'm going to do Python manage.py create super user. Going to be called Chris. Email will chris@app.com. Password will be password. It's a common password. It's okay. Then it creates a super user. So now if we go back to the application, we just bring up this one. Okay, close this. Oh, the port is in use. Okay, so I'm going to run it on another port. So let me run from 4200. Okay, so now when we go to the application, you can see that we are already logged in. But when I go to the admin, when I prefix with admin, you can see that we are brought to this admin section. So right here, we can come in here and then, let's see, actually there's an issue. So we set up the model, but we didn't run the migrations. So let's run the migrations. That's why you see we have the errors. So Python manage.py, make migrations. Yeah, it creates them, then we need to run them. It's like that they reflect, so migrate. Okay, so run server again. come back over here. Then now we can add categories. So I'm going to add, let's say one of our expenses is travel. Okay, so you can add travel. Then let's also add maybe food. I'm going to categorize it like restaurants. Okay, so save it. Then we have quite a few problems. One of them is it's showing us a category object instead of something more descriptive, and that's because we didn't set up the toString method. So right here, we need to set up a toString method by doing def. Okay, so right here we are just going to return the name. So self.name. Then of course I need to spell self correctly. Okay, so now if we come back and reload, let's create a new one. Let's say we are spending on insurance. Save. You can see that now this is readable. This is okay. Okay, so another problem we have is, yes, we have expenses here, but then our categories, it's prefixing it with an S, which is not what we want. So categories is actually not written like this. So for us to define another plural version of our model, you can come in here and then you define a class meta. So right here, I'm actually going to copy this. So right here, now we are going to define how it should be called in plural form, how this model should be called in plural form. So this one is going to be verbose underscore name underscore plural, which we set, actually plural is not written like this. Plural. How do you write plural? Plural. Really? Okay, we'll find out if that's correct. So we set it to a string. So here it's going to be categories. So this is not correct actually. So let's write it properly. Okay, good. Okay, so once we have that, let me restart the server so that it's running properly, and then come back to the admin section. You can see that now it's written properly. So problem solved. So now let's go back to our view and see how to create some data from the view. So coming back to the add, we need to set up a form. So from our model, we need to be able to take the category, the owner will pick it inside the app, the description, the date, then the amount. Okay, so first thing, let's pick the amount. So inside the form, we're going to define an input. How would it be called? Okay, so I'm going to add a card here just so it can look better. So card, then inside the card body, like that. So in here I'm going to set up an input group, a form group actually. So form group. Then in here we can set up the form control. So right here I'm going to set up a label. So this is going to be amount. Then in here I can set up a form control for the amount. So input is going to be input, class will be form control. Then I want it to be small, so I can do form control same, like that. So the first one, we are going to be picking like an amount, so number can be a good fit, at least better than text. So we need to give it a name so we can be able to pick the values in the request.post. So this is going to be amount. Okay, so once we have that, then we need to set up. Yeah, so that can do for now. So let's replicate this for the description and then the date. So this now will be text, of course. Let me change those. So this is going to be description. Let me change this one too. Okay, so this one will actually be a select. So the category will be a select. So define, actually let's keep the label, no issue there. So this will be category, and now in here we can find a select and then the options. So dot select, we need to give it a name just so we can pick values. So the name is going to be category. Okay, so in here we need to set up options. So this now can be like 1. So for now, remember we are going to be fetching this from the DB. So let me have it like display properly, and then we are going to put in the dynamic ones. So I have the category, the description, then the amount. Okay, so I hope that will be all. So let's first verify that we have all the properties catered for. So right here in our model, this is good. The date is not. So let's set up the date. So input type for date. So coming back to our template, we need to set up another one. So this is going to be like date, let's call it date of expense. Then input type will be date. Then the name will be expense underscore date. Okay, so we have a name here, we have a name here, we need a name, we have a name here. These also need the names and values. So let's have name equals, name will be the same name as the category, so keep that. Then the values, we are going to add them just in a while. Okay, so have this, have that. So once you have that one set up, now we can at least check it out to see how it looks. But let's add a submit button just so everything can be complete. So right here, let's see. I'm going to move the form in the card actually. Okay. Then I'm going to move it inside in the card body. Okay, so move it one more div inside. Okay, so now we can set up the submit button. So input, submit, then the value will be submit. Okay, so let's give it some class so that it looks good. So btn primary sm, fine. Okay, so let's see how it looks now. If you come back to the app, I'm going to go straight to the main website. So you come here, click add. We have add expense, and then our form is not showing up. So let's find out why. Okay, so this is a problem that we have. So actually, I think we can get some things to learn here. So whenever you extend from a base template, the only thing that's going to be rendered from your view are the things you add in the block content. Okay, so right now you see we are having an error where the block content is down. That's because we now have to move all our markup into the block content. Okay, good. So bring them in here, and then they should show. So if we reload, you can see that we have everything showing. Okay, so just some common issues that we need to fix here. You notice that our forms aren't looking great. So for us to fix that, we're going to come over here, and then we need to add like form controls to these inputs. So this, just make sure you have a form control one, and then the form control is same. Okay, so let's make sure we have the same for this. Then the input type submit, the class btn primary. Before you have the SM one, please have a primary one, a separate one. So now if we check, we can see that now it's looking a lot better. Okay, so now we need to fix this. So to fix it, let's see. So we need to give this select a class of form controller. Okay, so once we do that and reload, you can see that now it's looking good. Okay, so first thing, we're going to need to populate this with our options from our backend, such that the user can use pre-filled categories of expenses. So for us to do that, we are going to now go to our view, and then before we render, we need to first query for categories. So categories will be category, which will be the model we use to query by, but objects, and then we want all of them. Okay, so let's come over here, import that model. So from dot models, import categories. Let me also import expense, because we are going to need to work with it a lot. So now that we have it, okay, so now that we have it, we can pass it. So this is the index one, but let's pass it to. Okay, so now that we have it, I'm going to bring it also in the add expense view, and then also pass it. So let me create a context object, context, because I'm going to have categories here. Then I'm going to set them to the categories from the DB. Then I pass the context as the third parameter here. Okay, so once we pass that, now we can expect this in our template. So if we go back to our template, now we need to loop through the categories. So right here we can have a for. So just have a for loop. So it's going to be for category, not category. So it's going to be in categories. Then of course, so it's going to be category in categories. Then of course we need to enter for. So end for. And then in here, now we can render our option. So now the option will be, basically, as we know, the category has an attribute name. So now when we render an option, we can set the name. The name will be category. Okay. And then in here, we can put our dynamic name. So the dynamic name will come from category dot name. Okay, so we also gonna need to set the value, which you can do from value equals category dot name. Okay, so once we come back to our page and reload it, you can see that in categories we have our categories from the database. So whatever we add from the admin, it will be reflected here. Okay, good. So how do we now submit this form? So one of the first thing I'm going to show you is how to validate some of these inputs, and then show errors, and then I'll show you how to save it. Okay, so first thing, we are going to now work on validating it to make sure a user can't submit without adding an amount or a description. But the description is going to be optional, but an amount at least shouldn't be optional. So right here, when we click submit, we need to first validate that form. But first, let's first add our cross-site request forgery token. So right here, so in every form we have to add it, just so it can protect us from all those vulnerabilities in the web. So have it there, and then we need to create a view to handle this post request. So in the view.py, which is views.py, so right here, I'm going to create an if statement. So if request method equals, you guessed it, post, then we work from here. And this of course should be method. Let me correct it. So when it's post, then we can check for the amount. So to check for the amount, we can do amount equals request dot post, and then we pass the key. So this key should map exactly to the name that we give to the input. So it should map exactly to this. Okay, good. So once we have that, we can check if it's not there, and then we can give an error to the user. So to check, you can do if not amount, and that means we don't have the amount, user didn't submit it. Then we can add a message, something like messages.error course, it takes in the request at first. Let me just fix this one a bit. Then the second thing is the message. So you can say amount is required. Okay, so once we have that required, that's correct. We need to import the messages. So import, so from Django contrib, import messages. So of course we also need to go back to our same view. So we need to render our view. So render view, then this very one. And then in the view, we need to make sure that we have a space where the messages should display. So earlier we set up the other partial, this one, to basically show our messages. If this is the first video you're watching, I recommend you go back and check in the playlist for one like titled something like fresh messaging. Now that we have this, we need to import it. So we need to import it right here in our view. So I'm going to include it here. So now I can do include, then we are including partials / underscore messages.html. Okay, so once we have that and go back to the page, reload, let's try to submit. It's actually redirecting. So let's see what exactly is happening. So right here, it's a post request, and then we are sending to expenses. So when you come back to the view, oh yeah, oh interesting. So we should be submitting to add expenses and not expenses, which is here. Good. Okay, so let's correct that one. So now if we reload here, go back there, try to submit, you can see that we keep on the same view and our message is not being displayed. So let's try to see what exactly is happening. Here, we need to check if this is being called. So add a PDB. Okay, so now if we submit, you can see that it's not reaching here. So I'm going to wrap everything in here in an if statement. Okay. Actually, this is actually straightforward because, okay, so I'm going to check for post. Then I'm also going to check for get. So if request.method equals get, which will be the default one, and then we want to have this, let me tab this one over. Okay, so now it's fine. So if we reload here, try to submit, so we see did not return a valid response, returned none instead. So that's because when it comes to post, okay, so let's first see what we have in amount. So put a PDB there, then reload it, try to submit. It's actually coming through. So if request is get, then categories, then return this, fine. If it's post, okay, so the issue is we are actually nesting this if statement. You guys probably noticed that one earlier. So I'm going to bring it, stab it back a bit, and then reload, meaning now we save. You can see that now the PDB catches it. If we display amount, you can see that it's empty. If we click C to continue running the program, you can see we have an issue with context. So the context, we have to move it over outside any of these methods. So we have to move it above and then make sure it's accessible in all the if blocks. Then the categories also have to go outside. Or you can actually keep them inside, but then that means you might duplicate data in one way or the other if you ever need to use it in another if statement. So if you come back, you can see that now we have amount is required. Okay, so if we submit the amount and then reload, this would mean that, of course, you're going to get an error if you submit it like this. Okay, so let's do the validations for, actually, I think that's the one we are going to do to enforce. But then the issue that we have now is you notice that when we submit, we lose the previous value. Okay, so to persist the previous values, we are going to need to save those values in a variable. I'm going to have a variable called values in the context, and then I'm going to set it to request.post. Okay, so now if you go to the templates, we are going to have access to the previous request post values. So if you go to the template, which is add expense, which is here, so right here, like on amount, we can pass a value. So value, we can set it to our dynamic value, which would be values dot, then the name of this, which would be amount. And of course it should match the casing, so amount. Okay, so now if we reload and then try to save, you can see that it's lost. So if we add like 4,000, okay, if we try to save, let's see, our PDB is still running. I'm going to have to remove it. Okay, so let's do a check for the description, just to get the hang of the validation. So right here, I'm going to do the same thing for the description, but then I need to tab this one over. Okay, so description. Okay, so if not description, then we want to say description is required. Okay, so if we reload and then pass a name, and then pass an amount and then save, you can see that description is required and then our previous amount is persisted. Okay, so now if we pass description and then we don't pass the amount and then save, you can see that the amount is saved, but then we lose the description. So let's see how we can keep that one. So you notice that when it came to the HTML, we didn't like add a value for the description. So the value here will be the previous description. So here we can put values dot description. Okay, so let's try it again. So let's put this one, save, description is required. Let's put description, then we remove the amount, then save. Get amount is required, but then the description is kept. So now let's handle the submission of the form. Okay, so in the views.py, we have to continue writing some code. And by the way, we don't need this other if statement. We can remove it. Now we have the value for the amount and for the description. Now let's keep the value for the date and the one for the category. Okay, so right here, I'm going to bring in date and then category. Okay, so once you have this, now if we don't have like these errors we checked for, then we can go ahead and save this to our database. So the way we do that is by using the expense model. Then we call objects.create. Then now we need to pass in these values. So one, we are going to pass the amount. So the amount is going to equal to amount. Date is going to equal to the date that the user gives. Then the category is going to equal to the category that the user gives. What else? The description is going to equal the description that the user gives. Okay, so that should create. Now, whenever it creates, now that should create, and now we should be able to tell the user that the expense was saved successfully. So which we can do by doing messages.add, actually messages.success. Then we can pass a request. Then we can do expense saved successfully. Okay, good. So let me have this spelled correctly. Okay, so once we have that, now we can redirect to the expenses page such that we can see the expenses. So return, redirect. We're going to import it. So redirect. So this basically makes an HTTP redirect to a view. So if we are redirecting to a view in the app, you can just use the view name, which now will be expenses for our index.html. So let's import redirect from shortcuts and test it out. We come and try to submit the form. We get amount required. We submit it. Okay, so we have an error. We are trying to access date even when we are not providing date. So if you see the name here in our add expense, the name that we have on the date input is expense date. So this is what we want to check for in the view. So in the view, come over here and then make sure you're checking for expense date. Okay, so let's now retry again, reload, submit. There's an error. Provide the amount, submit the description, provide it, and then I'm going to choose maybe we spent on restaurant. Then I'm going to choose date. So let's say we did this yesterday. Okay, so that I'm going to make this one like food. Then when I click submit, so we have an error. So we are not passing the owner. So this is where we want to also save the user who is making this request, such that we can always have a way to know which user saved this expense. So right here, you need to pass owner, and owner is going to equal to request dot user. So the current logged in user is the owner of this expense being created. Yeah, makes sense. So if we reload here, then pass the amount, we are sure validation is okay, restaurant, yesterday, and then submit. Okay, so we are redirected to the expenses, and then we see expenses saved successfully. So now I want to be able to retrieve all our previous ones. We are going to go to our HTML. So in expenses index.html, right here, outside the breadcrumb section, outside this row, we are going to now create a table. So I'm going to have another container actually. So container, just so we can get some padding on the top. So right here, I'm going to create a table. So table, I'm going to have some classes. One will be table striped. Then one will be table hoover. It's called what? Table hoover. Okay, so once we have this, then we are going to have the table headers. So table header. So in the head, we can have a row, and then we can have the header. So th, this is going to be for the amount, and then the amount, of course, we have the currency, which I'll show you how to retrieve later. So the next thing will be that will be the amount. The next thing will be the category. Then the next thing will be the description. Then the next thing will be the date. And since we are the very user who created it, then there's no reason to show the user who created it. Okay, so now that we have the head, let's set up the body. So t-body, not to-body. T-body. So in here, now we can set up our rows. So these rows are going to need to be dynamic. Okay, so tr. Okay, so here we are going to have some TDs. So here one will be for the amount. So right now I'm going to add code some value just to have the markup done. Then maybe travel for the category. Then maybe description. Okay. Then the date. So we can do 12/12/2020. Okay, so now that if we go back, you're going to be able to see that now we have this basic table. So I'm going to add a class table to it just so it looks better. So add a class table. Let's look at it now. You can see that now it's actually better. Okay, so now let's retrieve our dynamic content. So if you go to our views.py in our index route, so we are going to get the expenses by doing expenses equals, we use the model, expenses, oh sorry guys, so we do expense, which is the model dot object dot, we want to now show the user only the expenses that they were created by them, because if you get to think about it, our website is going to be very popular. We are going to be having a lot of users using it, so we want a user to only see the expenses that they created. So to do that, you're going to filter all of them by the owner, of which the owner has to equal to the current logged in user. So request dot, you guessed it, cool. So dot user. So once we have that, now we can pass this in our context. So right here, I'm going to create a context dictionary here, context. And by the way, you can name it anything, but of course it has to be a good variable name. So now context, I'm going to pass expenses. Then for the value, I will pass our expenses. So now we can pass the third parameter here, context. Okay, so now we should have access to expenses in our view. So in the index.html, actually when I say view template, in our template, okay. So in the index.html, we should now be able to check if a user has some expenses and then display them. So for us to check if a user has some expenses, we are going to use an if here. Actually we can check it before we show the table, so that we don't even show the table at all. So we can do if expenses, we can call something called count, and then only then we can show the table. So outside we can end if, okay, so now that we have the expenses, we can loop over them and replace this dummy data. So right here we are going to use our for loop. So for expense in expenses, then we need to show a row, and then we need to end for outside. So end. Okay, so once we have that, if we go back and reload, you can see that we have two instances. So let's make them dynamic by replacing this to expense.amount. Okay. Then same thing for the category, the description, and the date. Okay, so this will be the description and the date. Oh no, so description, let's see. Actually, category comes second, then the description, and then the date. Okay, so once we have that, now we can come back and reload. And then you can see that we have some new, we have it pre-filled with our data from the database. So let's add another one. So let's say here we spent 500K. Then maybe let's say party with friends. Let's say it was travel, fine. So I'm going to, so here we can actually add more categories in the database. Let's say we spent this money yesterday. Okay, so if we save, you can see that it's saved, and then we have now 3. But then one thing that I don't like is our message is coming down. So I'm going to move it on top. So going to cut it out and then bring it on top of the table. So right here. So now if we reload, come in and create another one, say we were buying Rolex, okay, in restaurants. Okay, so that was yesterday, and then if we submit, you can see that it's saved, and then everything is updated, everything is well and good. So last time I showed you how you can order these. So you can see these are ordered by the date, so the most recent is on top, which is exactly what we wanted. So now that we have it there, we need a way to actually update it, so we can change like the category, so we can be able to change like the category, the amount, and all that stuff. So we're going to first start by adding like a link here to go and edit. So to start, I'm going to bring up the project in my VS Code. So going back to our template, which we added, which is the index HTML template. So right here, you see that we have our table header. So in our table head, okay, so in our table head, I'm going to add another empty th. So this one will correlate directly in the rows with a field that we are going to now add an edit button on. So I'm going to add another td inside the tr that we look through, such that we can have ability to edit each of those expenses. So right here, I'm going to add an a, and href will be, so we are going to create a view. So the view, we are going to give it a name of expense edit. Okay, so when it's like a detail view, like the expense edit, we can have a way of passing in like the instance itself. So right here, of course, we are going to use the URL utility, and then the second parameter that you can pass here will be the expense itself. So right here, we can pass expense like that. Then we can now call this one edit. So once we have that, I'm going to go ahead and give it some style just so it looks better. So class equals btn, let me call it primary, let me call it secondary. Okay, so once we have that, now we need to create our view. So in our views.py file, right here, we can define our view, which we do by, I'm going to call it expense underscore edit. Of course, takes in a request. Now we are going to handle the get request. So if request method equals get request, so this would mean when a user is trying to request for that page, then we want to render it. So return render. So render takes the request first, and then the template that we want to render. So the template is going to be in expenses. Then it's going to be called let's see, it's going to be called edit expense.html. Okay, so notice that this will be a detailed view. The detailed view can actually take in the resource itself. So right here, we can now pick the ID. But of course, for us, we are sending the expense, but we're going to send the ID instead. So right here, once we get it, we want to find it. So this will be expense equals expense objects get, and then we are going to get it by the ID. So this will be pk equals ID. And by the way, guys, pk is just an attribute that Django sets up automatically for any model. So you can always refer to these instances uniquely using it. So you don't need to like manually track the increments. It's all done behind the scenes using that pk attribute. So once we have it, now we can send it in here. So I'm actually going to move this one out of the view because we might need to use it in the post, out of the if. Okay, then I'm going to set up a context. So context, this now we pass expense, context dictionary pass expense. So this will be expense. Then we need to pass it here. So pass context. Okay, so let's also do an else part to handle the post, because we are going to need to be updating. So we are going to need to handle the post. So right here, we can still render this, but I want to just add a message just so we remember to do it. So I'm gonna put messages.info request. Then I'm gonna say maybe handling post form. Okay, so we'll have that for now. Okay, so let's go ahead and now create this template. So in our, actually create that HTML file. So in our expenses subfolder, we are going to create this file here. And then I'm going to use most of the stuff we already have in add, because it's going to look a lot similar. So I'm going to copy it, then we're going to like edit it a bit. So this is fine. Then right here, I'm going to have, so this is going to be expenses, then it's going to be edit expense. Okay, so from there, of course, we are going to need the amount. Then we are going to need the okay, the description, fine. We're going to need the categories, fine. So we are also going to need the date. So we're going to need everything here. I'm just going to change the submit text to be update. Oh, let me call it save. Okay, so once we have that, you can see that the values actually are looking out for the values in the, like from the view. So right here, we want to make sure that we are sending them. So at the moment, I'm going to have to send values, which will also be the previous expense information. So like that, such that when we pick them out like this, we are able to actually display them by default. Okay, so it makes sense. So also, so yeah, so that's well and good. So let's test it out and see. But before we do that, we need to register our view in our URLs. So right here, I'm going to, let me first paste this one there, then let me duplicate this. So this is going to be edit expense. Then here we can like pass a route from, we can pass a route. So we can pass a dynamic value to the route by doing, so since we are passing an ID, we are sure it's an int, so we can cast it to an int, then pass the ID. So once we have that, we need to of course rename this name to be the one that we refer to in the view. Then this has to go to views.edit. Okay, so add a comma here. So once that's set up, now we need to make sure that we are sending the ID. So that we go to our index.html, and then here we are going to send expense.id. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so we have an issue. So right here, we have expense edit not found. It's not a valid view name. Okay, so let's come back again and take a look. So in our urls.py, this should be expense-edit. Okay, cool. Let's reload again. There's an issue. Reverse for expense edit not found. Expense edit is not a valid view name. Expense edit expense/id. Okay, so let's check out the view to make sure that, so this should be expense edit. Okay, so let's take a look at okay, so I see the problem. So you see here, I'm actually passing this unnecessary character, which could be an issue. So let's reload. So now you can see that we are able to render, and we can see our edit page. So if you look in my left bottom corner, you can see that whenever I hover on an expense, we get a dynamic URL to link to. Okay, but for now these are quite big. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the button a bit. So right here in our index.html, We're going to add a simple class here, so it's going to be btn sm. So reload. So yeah, this is quite better. So clicking on edit takes us to a page. You can see now it's coming to a URL, and then it's trying to route to this. It's routing to this, and then it's passing a dynamic parameter, which we are sending right here. Okay, so when you're sending a default parameter, you have to make sure that the URL will be expecting it, and then of course your view has to expect it too. Makes sense, I guess. So right here, it's able to render it, and you can see, since we have the prefilled values, you can see that right here, the amount and description are already prefilled. So if I come back like here, let's say I go to this one for 500,000, you can see that we have that. So one of the things that we don't have is the category and then the date. So let's just work on fixing those. So for the category, we need to put in our categories from the DB and prefill them, and also we select the previously selected one. Okay, makes sense. So coming back here to the edit, so actually in the view, let's first get in our categories. So I'm gonna do categories. Okay, I'm gonna copy this. So then I'm gonna bring this right here. Then I'll make sure I add it to my context. Okay, so once we have that, looking at our expenses, you can see our edit expenses. You can see that it gets them and then looks over them and then displays each one of them. So if we reload here, you can see that we have them. But now, looking at this, we would want to have the prefilled one to be the current one to be prefilled as the default text. So right now you can see it's picking up randomly, so it's picking a different one. To do that, we are going to now have an option like this one, and then I'm going to have it on top. Then I'm going to add another attribute called selected, and then this basically is going to be showing values dot category. Okay, so values dot category. Let's see. Okay, so let's take a look. So right now our loop is going after we show this option, and basically what our loop will do is add more options to that. So let's reload. So yeah, you can see that restaurants are selected. So if I click like this one for insurance, you'll see that insurance is already selected, which is good. So once we have that, let's work on updating these values. Okay, so right now when we try to save, you can see that there is an issue with the dates. Let me go back here. Okay, so let me select the correct date here. Try to save. You see we get expense saved successfully, which is not actually true. So looking at our form, you can see that it's submitting to, so looking at our form here, you can see that it submits to add expenses, but what we actually want is it to submit to edit expense. Okay, so if we look at our view, you can see that our view actually takes in an ID. So we also need to pass it in. So right here, we can pass the ID by doing, since we are passing in the view, since we are passing the, which is here, since we are passing the expense, we can actually now in here do expense dot ID. Okay, such that we can always pick it up. Okay, so let's go back to our view. So right here, when it's like a post request. So I'm going to do actually another explicit check. So if it's post, then basically we want to do all the things we did when creating. So right here, I'm going to come in and then add expense. So I'm going to copy this. Okay, actually I'm going to copy everything. I'm going to paste it. Then I need to move this one inside. Okay, so we are going to now check if they are sending an amount, validate it. Then this will go to edit. Let's bring it up. Okay, so once we have errors, we want to basically re-render the same page and then show the error. So if we don't have errors, basically we want to now save this expense. So right here we have already queried for the expense. So instead of creating, we are going to do the update. So to do the update, you do expense, then the values that you want to update. So I'm going to copy all this and have them close here. So .owner, this will be request.user, of course. Okay, so expense .amount will be the new amount. Expense .date will be the new date. So expense .category will be the new category. Okay, and then finally the expense let's see. Let me bring this one on top. Then finally the expense description will be the new description. Okay, so once you have that, then we need to save it. So here you can do expense .save, and then that should update it. Then we can say expense updated successfully. We should be able to test it out and see what we have. So going back to the view, I'm going to reload it. Then we get our list. Click on edit. Then we have an issue. So reverse for edit expenses. So that's because we are making a mistake actually here in edit expense. This should be edit expense. Edit expense. That should be the correct one. Okay, so server not starting. I'm going to stop it and then restart it. Then reload. So there's an issue, not a valid view name. Okay, let me cross check on it. So in our urls.py, it's called expense edit. Sorry about that, guys. So right here, it's not edit expense, but expense edit. Cool. So reload. And yes, we are there. Everything is fulfilled. So now let's try to modify the amount to be like 1 million. Those are 4 zeros. Those are 6. Description, new. Then let's change this one to be family. Then let's change the date also, like 6th, then save it. Okay, so we have an error. So it's saying cannot assign lazy object. This trailing comma here. If you look at what we are doing in the code, you see we have a comma on the user, and this actually changes the meaning of everything. So we want to make sure that it's not there. So let's continue now. So if you come back to our edit form, let's say we edit this to 5th, and then we change the description to have some 5s. Let's make the amount to have more zeros, and then try to save it. So yeah, so you can see that it gets updated, which is good, which is what we want. So now let's go ahead and actually be able to add ability to like delete this one. So for us to do that, I'm going to actually add it here, but you can add it anywhere depending on your UI needs. But this just to show you guys how you can do that. So in our edit view, right here where we have the breadcrumb. So you see the breadcrumb basically is taking off the whole width. So I'm going to have a row, and then I'm going to have 2 columns. So this one will take off 10. Then I'm going to ask for 2. And then in the second one, it's going to take off 2. So that they are 12 in total. So I just lost my breadcrumb. So let me just undo. Okay, so this is taking off the whole width. So I'm going to cut it away and then create a row. Then in the row, I'm going to create 2 columns. This is going to take off 10 columns. And then the next one is going to take off 2. So call md2. So this will have the breadcrumb, and then I'm going to have the delete button in the next column. Okay. So right here, I'm going to have a, then I'm going to add an href because we want to, of course, hit a view. So this view is going to be called delete. So URL. So I'm going to have like expense dash delete dash delete, and then here we need to pass our ID in from the view. So right here we can pass expense .id. So let's close it out and let's give it a name, delete. Then I'm also going to give it some classes just so it looks better. So this will be btn danger, because we are deleting stuff. Then I'm going to make a small one because small is good. Anyway, so now we need to create the view, otherwise it will crash. So let's go to our views.py. So def, I'm going to call it delete expense, takes in the request and then our unique ID. So bring it in, but you can call this anything, but you just need to make sure it will expect the second parameter. Then right here, now we can pick it. So we can pick the expense using the ID. So we can do expense. So now the expense here will be expense objects get. So now we can get by ID. So pk equals ID. Okay, so once we get that, now we can of course delete it. So you can do expense.delete. Okay, so this will do. So what will happen now is a user is going to be able to make a request to this view, and then what we'll do is basically find it, then delete it. So I'm gonna also tell the user that we deleted it. So now we can do messages.success, pass our request, and then the message, which will be expense removed. Okay, so now let's redirect our list so we can see an updated list. So redirect to expenses. Then we need to register our view. But then it's important that we don't forget the name that we are like looking out for. So I'm going to first paste it somewhere, then copy the view, come back to the URL, then I will I will copy, duplicate this. Okay, so right here, the path is going to be expense delete, then slash the ID, then now the name will be the name we'll be looking out. So once we have that, then we need to call the correct function right here. Then I'm going to clean this one up. Remember to have a comma there. And then let's test out and see what we have. So coming back to our app, when you reload on the details, you can see that we have a delete here. So it's quite small, but when you hover above it, you can see that it's pointing to the view for expense delete. So when you click it, so we have an issue. So this is because it's saying it didn't return a valid HTTP response. Okay, so the problem is we are not returning the redirect. So let's remember to do that. Then now we can actually remove our PDB, because that should actually work. So reload, go to this one, click delete, it's gone. Go to this one, click delete, it's gone. But of course, normally guys, when you're trying to delete something, it's always good to prompt a user to confirm if they are sure, so they don't delete something so they don't like lose their data. But for now, we are going to keep it to that, but feel free to add those functionalities as I will be posting this code on GitHub. Okay, so that will do it for this video. In the next video, we are going to go ahead and start working with chats, I believe. So if this video helped you out, or if you're interested in this kind of content, please consider subscribing, give the video a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.